archives of the London Missionary Society, there exists a series of medical reports from 1863 documenting a phenomenon that Western medicine at the time struggled to categorize. It was called Ramanenjana. These records were maintained by Dr. Andrew Davidson, a Scottish surgeon whose observations provide the primary clinical layer of this mystery. Davidson did not begin his report with rumors of spirits. He began with biological data. During the first weeks of May 1863, Davidson admitted patients suffering from severe muscle spasms. According to his detailed account, the Ramanenjana, or Dancing Mania of Madagascar, published later in the Antananarivo Annual, these patients maintained a heart rate that remained consistently at a lethal threshold, yet they showed no signs of typical cardiac failure or the expected exhaustion of such exertion. What astounded Davidson most was the physical endurance. He documented cases of women who danced continuously for 3 to 4 days and nights across the rugged, high-altitude terrain of the Imarina Highlands without food or water. When he attempted to administer sedatives or physically restrain them for examination, the patients fell into a state of catalepsy, a form of muscular rigidity where their bodies became as heavy as stone, impossible to lift or move. The moment the restraint was removed, they immediately resumed their rhythmic dance. This was not a description of the supernatural. This was a clinical report of a biological anomaly. However, beneath this medical veneer, Davidson noted an illogical detail. These patients, though in a state of delirium, all made the same claim. They insisted they were carrying out the orders of King Radama II, the ruler whom the court had officially declared dead from illness just 2 weeks prior. From a small clinic in Antananarivo, this phenomenon began to spread with the speed of an epidemic, but with the calculated precision of a military march. It opens our central question: can a biological anomaly be a deliberate act of historical resistance? To understand why thousands of people fell into this state, we must examine the political records of Madagascar in May 1863. King Radama II was a fierce reformer. He had signed the Lambert Treaty, granting vast resource and land rights to the French. This move enraged the traditionalist Marina aristocracy. On the morning of May 12th, the court announced the king was dead. The method, recorded in the reports of the British and French consuls at the time, was specific. The king was strangled with a silk cord. According to Marina law, royal blood must not be spilled on the ground. Therefore, strangulation was the legal way to remove a monarch without violating a sacred taboo. Queen Rasoherina ascended the throne immediately. One of her first edicts was to establish absolute silence, a total ban on mentioning the name of Radama II, a ban on public mourning, and a firm declaration that the king was deceased. The political system had successfully locked every channel of speech, but it was at this exact moment that the Ramanenjana appeared. Records from the missionary William Ellis, another eyewitness present in Antananarivo, reveal a striking pattern. The sick often began showing symptoms only when standing near symbols of the new administration. They weren't just dancing. They were moving along the red dirt roads leading from the coastal regions, gathering at strategic transit nodes and advancing toward the capital. At this point, Dr. Davidson faced a paradox. Why did a medical symptom understand and react so precisely to geopolitical boundaries? Thousands of citizens who had been stripped of their political voice were now using their own bodies to create an entity that could not be arrested or executed, an army of the dancing. This is where we enter our second layer of evidence, the systematic expansion. As May turned into June 1863, The medical anomaly of the Ramanenjana underwent a phase shift. It was no longer a collection of isolated cases in rural clinics. It had become a coordinated geographic movement. In the archives of the British consulate, letters from officials describe a contagion that seemed to possess an internal map. The dancers were not wandering aimlessly. They were moving from the coastal peripheries, the very areas most affected by the king's international treaties, toward the symbolic heart of the Marina Kingdom, the Rover of Antananarivo, the massive wooden palace complex that sat atop the city's highest hill. Dr. Davidson's journals began to record a detail that deeply troubled the colonial administration. The dancers appeared to respect the internal borders of the kingdom, or they would stop at certain village boundaries, perform a specific ritual, and only then proceed. Even more striking was the linguistic anomaly. Davidson noted that uneducated laborers, who spoke only the local dialects of the coast, were suddenly using the complex, formal court language of the capital. They were addressing officials by their correct titles and demanding the reinstatement of the king's policies using the exact legal terminology of the cancelled treaties. This leads to our second recurring question. Why did a medical symptom understand and react so precisely to political boundaries? If this was a neurological breakdown, it was one that possessed a high-level administrative memory. By plotting the points of outbreak on a map of 1863 Madagascar, a clear pattern emerges. But the Ramanenjana didn't follow the wind or the water supply. It followed the royal processional routes. Every major stop the army made corresponded to a location where King Radama II had once held court or signed a decree. It was as if the population was retracing the king's life through a collective, physical ritual. At this point, we encounter the first major archival silence. The new Queen's government, realizing that the disease was a form of mass protest that they could not legally suppress, began to censor the reports. Orders were sent to local governors to stop describing the Ramanenjana as a message and to treat it strictly as a convulsion of the brain. But the eyewitnesses, the missionaries and the traders, recorded a different reality. They saw thousands of people standing in front of government buildings, not shouting, but dancing in total silence, a silence that was louder than any riot. It was a somatic coup. The state had banned the king's name, but it could not ban the thousands of bodies that had become his living monument. This is where the story shifts from a mystery of movement to a mystery of selective perception. As the dancers reached the outskirts of Antananarivo, they developed what Davidson described as a morbid sensitivity. It wasn't just any music or any sight that triggered them. It was highly specific. The dancers showed a violent, physical revulsion to the color black. In the 1860s, black was the color of European mourning, the color worn by the missionaries and the officials who supported the new traditionalist queen. If a European or a high-ranking Marina official appeared in a black coat or hat, the sick would fall into violent convulsions, screaming until the object was removed from their sight. Conversely, they were magnetically drawn to the color red. Red was the sacred color of the Marina royalty, the color of the late king's banners. The dancers would weep with joy at the sight of a red silk cloth, their heart rates stabilizing, their movements becoming graceful instead of erratic. This was sensory policing. The illness was acting as a judge, identifying allies and enemies through a visual code. Is it a disease or a message? If a biological virus can distinguish between the political symbolism of two different colors, is it still a virus? Or have we crossed the threshold into a new kind of collective human technology? By the end of June 1863, the red dirt roads leading to Antananarivo were no longer conduits for commerce. They had become a stage for a biological blockade. The government of Queen Rasoherina, which had risen to power on the promise of restoring order and tradition, now faced a crisis that no traditional military strategy could solve. The rover, the massive wooden palace complex, sat atop the city's highest hill, overlooking a capital that was effectively under siege by its own citizens. But this was not an armed rebellion. There were no barricades, no shouting, and no weapons. There was only the relentless, rhythmic thudding of thousands of feet. The Royal Marina Army was one of the most disciplined in Africa at the time, trained by British officers and equipped with modern muskets. Yet, when the Queen ordered the soldiers to disperse the dancers, the military machine stalled. In the official reports of the British consulate, a chilling detail emerges. The soldiers refused to fire. It wasn't a mutiny in the traditional sense. It was a failure of belief. The soldiers, watching the dancers' eyes that seemed to look through them toward a king they had been told was dead, became convinced they were facing a spiritual force. To fire on the dancers was to fire on the Hasina, the sacred life force of the Marina monarchy itself. The state had the monopoly on violence, but the Ramanenjana had the monopoly on sacredness. Faced with a military that would not act, the Queen turned to legislation. We find in the Marina archives a series of increasingly desperate edicts issued in July 1863. The government officially reclassified the Ramanenjana. It was no longer a medical condition. It was declared a criminal contagion. Anyone found dancing was to be arrested. Anyone caught providing water or shade to a dancer was to be treated as a conspirator. But how do you imprison an entire population that is technically sick? The jails of Antananarivo were quickly overwhelmed, not by criminals, but by people in a state of catatonic rigidity. When the guards tried to move the prisoners, they encountered the same phenomenon: doctor. Davidson had documented. The bodies became impossibly heavy, anchored by a physical weight that defied their actual mass. This leads to a significant archival gap. Between mid-July and early August, the official royal diaries become strangely sparse. The daily entries regarding state security suddenly stop. It is as if the government realized that by recording the Ramanenjana, they were giving it a permanent place in history. They chose instead to stop looking. But as the official records went silent, the linguistic anomaly reached its peak. Dancers standing outside the palace walls were now reciting the exact terms of the treaties Radama II had signed, treaties that had been burned by the new government. They were reciting them in unison, thousands of voices acting as a living, breathing backup of a deleted historical record. As we look back through the layers of Davidson's clinical logs, the Queen's edicts, and the missionary memoirs, a final, unavoidable pattern emerges. The Ramanenjana did not end with a medical breakthrough. It did not end with a mass arrest. It ended with a signature. In August 1863, under immense pressure from both the internal epidemic and external colonial powers, Queen Rasoherina's government made a series of quiet, unpublicized concessions. They agreed to honor several of the late king's private commercial agreements and allowed the British and French legations to remain in the capital. Within days of these political shifts, the Ramanenjana began to fade. The patients did not recover slowly. According to Davidson, they simply stopped. The heart rates normalized. The rigidity vanished. Thousands of people who had been in a state of life-threatening physical extremity for months simply walked back to their rice fields and resumed their lives as if nothing had happened. Was the Ramanenjana a mass psychogenic illness? In modern medical terms, that is the most likely label. but labels often act as a way to stop asking questions. If we look at the evidence, the geographic intent, the sensory policing of colors, the linguistic accuracy of the court language, and the precise timing of its cessation, we are forced to consider a different possibility. The 19th century was an age where the colonial state was learning how to control the mind through censorship and the body through modern weaponry. In Madagascar, the Ramanenjana may have been the first successful somatic coup. When the state made it illegal to speak, the people's biology became the megaphone. When the king's name was erased from the paper, his spirit was written into the muscles and nerves of his subjects. It leaves us with one final, lingering image from Davidson's notes. Years later, the doctor revisited a village that had been a center of the dancing. He asked a man who had participated why he had done it. The man didn't talk about spirits. He didn't talk about illness. He simply pointed to the red soil of the highlands and said, "The earth remembered what the palace tried to forget." As we move further into an age where information is increasingly controlled and historical records can be deleted with a keystroke, the Ramanenjana of 1863 stands as a reminder. When a civilization is stripped of its voice, can the human body itself become the ultimate weapon of memory?